Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And we sort of got caught up in that, but I think that we can get you out of here.
Okay.
Because I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to get out of here.
I saw your daughter. Yeah, she said she had to step out.
That's my granddaughter.
Your granddaughter, okay. Yeah,
she looks like she's a grown.
She sure does. She's always like that from 3 years ago. It's chewing on.
Okay, doctor, now what are we going to talk about?
I think we will talk about the importance of African American History Month, or so anything you want to call it.
African American History Week.
Okay, month, yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's do that, and that'll allow you to deal with any aspect of it.
Okay.
Doctor, okay.
I hear you.
Y'all be careful now.
Yeah, you don't see those caps too much at the Lorraine Motel.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were 3 professors from over at Vanderbilt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In the history department, you say?
Well, in the divinity department, Dr. Baldwin and Dr. Anderson and Dr. Howard.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Over at, I think they're all in well, Dr. Baldwin retired from Vanderbilt Divinity, but the other 2, Anderson and Howard,
they're still there.
Over there. As a matter of fact, Dr. Anderson, the one that just walked in, I think he taught over at Tennessee State University in the psychology department.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think, see, who did he say he worked with over there? I can't remember, but I think he taught over at Vanderbilt. Are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Now, thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is African American History Month, and we're fortunate to have with us Dr. E.K. Sanford from Tennessee State University to talk about African American History Month. And of course, Doctor, let me welcome you to the show this morning and tell you how delighted we are to have you, and especially to talk about African American History Month, because I think that over the last many years that we've had an opportunity to talk to you on this show, we've talked about African American history, African American History Month, and you've made a tremendous contribution in terms of bringing us information not only dealing with the African American, but with sociological situations itself. And so let's have you to talk about Dr. E.K. Sanford for a few minutes by giving us some information in reference to your background, education, and your experiences. And after that, we'll get into the second segment, and then we'll talk about the African American History Month, or the African American History Celebration, or the African American History Year, however you wish to proclaim it.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much again. It's always a pleasure being here and always a pleasure sharing information. And as you mentioned, I'm Dr. E. Kelly Sanford. I'm a professor of sociology at Tennessee State University, and I've been there now for over 20 years. And I hope you listening audience know that you and I were there at the same time and had some of the same students who leave my class, go to yours, your class, and come to mine. And I really enjoyed those years with you and being here again today. I did my postdoc degree, which I would like to share today, at the Pennsylvania State University up in State College, Pennsylvania, Penn State. And there I did a postdoc at the National Institute of Mental Health on gerontology, intergenerational family studies, looking at the African American family. Did my doctorate degree, very proud to say, at Howard University in Washington, D.C., where I had other experiences there, working with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and very fortunate to work with the national headquarters of the American Red Cross. I was with the groundbreaking research that was done at that time on HIV/AIDS education. And as you may very well know, for the listening audience, that the rollout of HIV/AIDS programs came out of Washington, D.C. at the national headquarters of the American Red Cross, and I was the evaluation unit at that time working with that project. And they had a specific program related to the African American HIV and AIDS, which we'll probably get into a little bit more today. Undergraduate work at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm originally from Oxford, North Carolina, and it's not too far, I hate to say, from Durham or Raleigh. I know a lot of people may not know those little small towns. And if I may, I would like to give a plug out of also having experience at the University of Michigan at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan while I was working on my doctorate degree. And I've had other experiences as well. Yes.
And so in a real sense, you got a lot of information in reference to the African-American experience, as we once called it.
Yeah.
But during this particular time of the year, we think in terms of the celebration, the annual celebration, which at one time was a weekly celebration and then a monthly celebration, and now it's an annual celebration dealing with the African-American experience.
Yeah.
Let's talk about why we, over the next couple of minutes, why we celebrate African-American History Month.
Well, as you may very well know, we are made up of a nation of a lot of different ethnic groups that came from a lot of different European countries, and they migrated here, and this is a very topical issue today as we look into the 21st century. But the experience of the African was totally different other than other Europeans that came to these shores. Native Americans, we have to give recognition on this discussion that they were already here. This was their land. Africans were enslaved and brought here in a very forceful way. So that's why I'm here to talk about today the importance of sharing the African-American history. And as you just mentioned, Dr. Carter G. Woodson felt that same importance a number of years ago when there was only an African-American History Day, and then it moved to an African-American History Week and a month. And now I think you were right in your assessment that it should be celebrated throughout the year, every year, 24/7. And we've done an excellent job. You can look at here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'd like to encourage the listeners to go to the African American Museum that is recently opened. And I think it's free and open to the public. And so there is this celebration now of the African American experience in America.
Very good. And so the African American History Museum, located in Nashville, Tennessee, is now open. Is that what you're telling us?
It is now open. It is now open. It's open to the public and it's free. And so not only should, I think everyone here should go. I mean, it's just an open celebration for everyone because we contributed to the culture of this American society.
Very good, and I'm glad to know that it's open. And so what we'll do, we'll take our first commercial break, Doctor, and then we'll come back. We'll be back with you following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. E.K. Sanford from Tennessee State University, and he's given us some information relative to the African-American history experience during this particular month. Let's talk about that, Doctor.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we were picking up from the last segment by saying how it is relevant and very important for us to have such a celebration, not only for African Americans, but for all Americans, and even people that are coming to the shores that's migrating from other countries even today. Because of that unique experience of enslavement here that went on for over 244 years, and how the government at that time, with increasing laws of 1776, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution, left this group of people out who have been here for hundreds of years. So when we think of that document that said life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it was not inclusive of people of African descent. And more, when they created laws that left people of African descent out. So if you just recall and reflect on the Civil War, that war was pretty much for 3 reasons, although there were many more, but one was to maintain an economic machinery of people of African descent for free, to maintain that machinery, to maintain a culture here within the South as it was, and to keep people of African descent enslaved. So there were a lot of other reasons people could argue, and if we had a big debate here going on, people could come up with other reasons, but those are 3 of the major reasons why. And then after that, people just didn't open their arms up with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which everyone should know the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. And then if it was abolished, you have to be a citizen. The 14th gave citizenship right, and the 15th Amendment, and we're talking about 1866, that gave the right to vote. And we're still dealing with voting rights issues today. That's right, voter suppression today. And when you think about Dr. King, since we're coming up on the celebration of his birthday in recognition of the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was saying in the 60s, 100 years later, we still do not have the right to vote. So from that time, we moved into Jim Crow laws that were just something that was created to still segregate people of African descent. And Dr. Du Bois talked about the demarcations of segregation that are still very present in our society today. So when we see these demarcations, you know, institutions such as HBCUs or railroad tracks in cities throughout the South, that predominantly one group of ethnic group live on one side and the others live on the other. Now with gentrification, people are being pushed out and housing have certainly changed, but still very much present within our society today. So with these laws, it is very important for everyone to understand that history. Now, from a sociological and cultural standpoint, one of the sad parts about it is that if we do not understand the history, not only does that ethnic group, meaning African Americans and other ethnic groups, not understand why there is still such a need today for inclusiveness or policies, rules and regulations such as affirmative action that are still needed today. It was needed in the past because while things might appear to be a lot better now, there's still no fairness, still not 100% what they should be of fairness within our society. One that I would like to bring up is that if you look at something you would think as far as music is concerned, at our national symphonies throughout the United States. And if you went through and Google pictures, you would not see people of African descent in any of the string section. It's only about 1.8% of someone that's even in the orchestras. So we have these systems out there that have still prevented qualified people. We're not talking about let someone be in that's not qualified, but not only in symphonies, but in other institutions that make up the American society today. So if we don't know about the history, we'll be doomed to create some of the same past mistakes that were done in the past in the present. So therefore, there is a strong need to have African American history throughout not only the month, but throughout the year for inclusiveness in school systems so we can have a better society.
Go on, Dr.
And so I was just ready to say, you know, when we're thinking we're making footsteps in the fourth, here we are in the 21st century with a president, Trump, that is really brought about a resurgence of past racism that was quite bad in the past. And you can't say that it had eradicated and it wasn't there anymore, but it's been a resurgence of it. People feeling justified in coming out and treating people in unequal ways and very harsh treatment. And it's very present within the society in which we live in today. You see an emergence of those same terrorist groups that were in the past with an increase in membership. Although you don't see people marching around in the white robes, they are all dressed up in a suit and tie today, but acting in the same very racist ways.
And the same deprivation of life, you know, it's one thing to hang somebody,
that's right,
kill them or shoot them, and et cetera.
Yeah.
But it's also another thing to starve them in a real sense, to put them in an economic condition in which their lives are threatened. And so I agree with you.
That's right. Very well said. Yes, and so those things are very prevalent within our society today. So as we have this discussion, I think it's a historical fact now, so coincidental that we're having a discussion, but this is the longest time period within our government that the government has been shut down. And you have over 800,000 people that did not get a check this past Friday. Whenever you look at it, you have to understand that that is hurting a lot of people.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, that it's almost incomprehensible.
It really is.
To think in terms of, I was saying to my wife the other night that what if our check didn't come this month or whatever, and et cetera. And that's a traumatic kind of situation to have that many people exposed to it over whatever it might be. And so, I think, but now what we are experiencing now, we've always experienced it in our past. And that's why I think you would say that it's important for us to recall the kind of situations that we came out of in order to be able to understand where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're so right. And one other interesting point to connect with that is that given this situation, a lot of people that might be the federal level of a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and move on up into 11, 12, with 6 figures without getting a check, they may be able to last a little longer, but it really brings to relevance how we are still working class people, and that all of us are in this so-called boat together in a society where the wealthy control, and when this type of circumstance happens, I think is at this point where people recognize that it could be close to a paycheck to paycheck. Some may be able to go a little longer, but there is that need to be able to work and be employed and get a check.
There's only so many days that you can go without receiving some kind of compensation for whatever you're doing.
Absolutely.
And of course, a large number of folks are caught up in that kind of situation. And so what we're going to do, Doctor, we're going to take our commercial break, and we're going to pick that up after this very, very short commercial break. And we'll be back with our audience following this break. Thank you. Welcome to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. E.K. Sanford from Tennessee State University, and he's giving us some information relative to the African American History Experience, or the African American History Month. Let's continue, Doctor.
Yeah, because we had ended the last segment by saying of looking at a horrible situation here in America on this present day in 2019 at the brink of a new year and a new century in which we're living in. But as we talk about African American History Month and the need for that to be included in our educational curriculum throughout the United States, so that people can understand the contributions that have been made from not only African Americans, but and how it contributes to all of its institutions that make up our society. And we've done a great job, if you think about it, since Dr. Carter G. Woodson with African American Day, to having other ethnic groups having their months of celebrating their culture and their history as well. So this has helped our society, I think, in a way. But some things can, of course, give setbacks. And it's unfortunate that in many instances, when you think about the legacy of America, the dominant groups, meaning the majority group, when there's an increasing amount of minority group that makes up the population, certain people can use fear to get into the mindset of others to think that they need to go back to old ways of being and habits of treating people unfairly and in terroristic ways, bringing about discriminatory actions again, being hateful. And that's what's kind of occurring right at this present time. So there's a need now more than ever for African American History Month and for people to be understanding of it and the contribution that everyone has made. And while there are increasing amount of number of people of different ethnic groups, still there's a lag. within the actual numbers that there should be. I use the symphonies throughout the United States, but I think if you look at many of the institutions, you know, other than certain types of sports, you'll still find that there's not the proportion of, say, 12 to 13% of African Americans that make up our society in comparison of being in certain types of school. But there have been a lot of progress made. And I do want to make another comment, because sometimes in my discussions with people, they have a tendency to forget that it was because of the civil rights movement that other types of opportunities for people came about, such as women. Women, of course, at one time did not have certain rights, and they could not enter into the labor force. And it was because of, for instance, no one at universities said, well, my goodness, maybe we should have women's sports. There was a Title IX that came out of the civil rights movement that allowed women to have an opportunity. Or if when we see an increased amount of women into executive positions or into business positions or politics or entering into law schools and medical schools, it was because of a civil rights movement. But today, you can see very conservative parties like the Tea Party that want to try to bring a backlash to improvements of everyone, where they actually had the opportunities to get in those positions because of the civil rights movement. And it just wasn't there initially, but people have a tendency, if you don't know your history, then you have a tendency to have these thoughts and patterns that you want to keep others out of opportunities and setbacks, or you have an ideological type of a thought to embrace something that is totally incorrect and very exclusive of people versus being inclusive of people.
Very good.
Yes.
And of course that means the rise of hate groups, and
absolutely,
KKK and other kinds of groups that Africans are very, very familiar with, but a large number of other folks might not understand why we feel toward them as we do. And I think that there's a reason for that. And think of all of the deprivation, the burnings, the lynchings, and all of those things that many of us know about, because they not only were a part of our experience, but that is what our relatives talked about when we gathered around the heater every night in the cabins and the houses and et cetera. That was always one of the problems, or one of the issues of the treatment of African Americans and et cetera. So we have a long history in reference to that.
Absolutely. And then when you look at the politics of today, we live in a two-party system. You have Democratic and Republican, you may have independents. But within the Democratic Party, you might have those that they like to use this term to the left, that almost like everyone knows of a Bernie Sanders. It might be a little bit to a socialist Democrat, to more or less of a moderate or liberal Democrat, or might have a conservative Democrat. And then you have the possibly very conservative Republican to a liberal conservative, to the Tea Party conservative. And now whatever they are calling themselves now, to be so extreme, like that our President Donald Trump is emerging, and where you have many Republicans that are repugnant of that type of a thought. They are saying this is not like President Reagan's being a Republican. This is not like the late President George W. Bush, Herbert Bush, that's recently passed. It wasn't his thought of being Republican. This is something that's very extreme, that is seeping into that group of people out there who have hatred in their hearts about being fair to everyone else, and looking at other minority groups and saying they are taking our place, or not wanting to be inclusive of other people coming to the country, and want to create policies in that type of a way.
And so not really understand what America is all about.
Absolutely.
You see, that we are a nation of immigrants. All of us came from somewhere else.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And the sad part, that group, they came from somewhere, and they are so latching on to something that is hatred versus understanding they have an ethnicity as well. I know this show is not going into that, but when you look at the initial ethnic groups that came, they emerged as those boroughs in New York City, and they had Little Italy and Chinatown and the Polish area. All of those little ethnic groups were there. Many of the Irish. We still celebrate a certain time or period, St. Patrick's Day. So there are these contributions that have been made by every ethnic group, and others that are emerging might have good people that will contribute to the overall culture of the American society.
And I still say, Doctor, in spite of everything, that the United States of America is still the best country in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it's the best country in the world when it comes to Africans, because I think I know enough about the history of countries and et cetera to be able to make that kind of assessment. Not because I am an African American, but I think that in dealing with all of the other races and all of the other people in all of the other countries, I still think that I'm in pretty good shape being an African American, et cetera. And I think that many of us feel the same way. And I think that whatever any other group might be, they should feel the same way in reference. But we also have to recognize that no matter how we feel about our own personal group, that we have to live with, we have to work with, and we have to be a part of all of these other groups. And I think that that is what really makes an American.
It certainly does. And I think anyone in academia fights for diversity in higher education. And that's how you sum that up very well. It's sad, though, because some of the newer generation, they have to be just as inclusive, understanding the history, not only of their experience, but others as well, in order to have a great nation in which we live in. And to the degree that we can do that is to the degree that we can have a much better society that wants everyone to benefit from it. And we are a nation that's rich enough to do it.
And have enough land and have enough everything that all we have to do is be willing to share it with others as it was shared with us.
Yeah, that's right.
Of course, and I think that if anybody can say that, who came from slaves, you know that other people ought to be able to say the same thing. Well, last minute, Doctor.
Yes, sir. Well, I would like to conclude by saying we always try to end on a positive note, to try to have some recommendation. I think education is still very, very important. I think in this day and time with our millennials and the newborns coming, we have to really understand, we have to pull back from the technology. There's a lot of positive things in it, but it's done something to us cognitively. So we have to try to pull back a little bit and do more time with just reading and comprehending and doing some of the basics. We used to call it the 3 R's. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. And although those things didn't spell out right, they're still just as important now as they were then. And so we have to pull away and just try to have a better society.
Very good. Let me thank you, Dr. Sanford, for giving us that excellent information. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.